Let us process together.
Right, because
Yeah.
that's where I am really freaked out by the amount of people who can see a complex event that takes thousands of different individuals and many different groups of people, and chaos erupts, and how many people know exactly what to do immediately and how to respond to it, and first of all, what's going on. Is it the beginning of something? Is it the end of something? Is it an anomaly? Who is doing what? Who is what? And what do we want to happen? And if we did whatever we want to happen, what would be the best ways to do that? I mean, I don't understand how everybody's so confident that. I mean, here's what I know. The right thing to do is announce to your non-racist friends that you will not stand for racism. That's what I know is the safe thing to do that I see everybody doing.
Well, I
but
think
that is like, okay.
You're talking about what should the average citizen do, or what should politicians do?
No, I don't know. I mean, wait, what do we even? I mean, that's even still way ahead of where I'm at. I'm just barely figuring out what happened, who's doing what, where.
Are you saying
who is what?
Okay, you're obviously not saying that you don't know the facts of the case.
Some of them, most of the facts of the case,
I
don't know.
There was a rally, and I'm not. By the way, I've read very little about this, but it seems obvious to me that there was a rally of white nationalists, including Richard Spencer, the Tiki Torch folks,
and that would be self-proclaimed white nationalists, right?
Yeah,
that's because part of the problem I have is mislabeling of groups. So
no. They believe that America should be based on white European culture.
Yes, Western culture, which they believe is tied to whiteness.
Yeah, they call it white European or whatever.
Right.
So they had a demonstration, and one of their kind. Now, I guess I don't know how connected he was to the whole group. We do know that like that group is like doing Hitler salutes and etc.
Wouldn't even? I mean, it makes me sound like some apologist, but wouldn't that be some of them? I mean,
sure. I mean, there's not that many of them in the group.
Well, that's another debated thing. Some people think there's 10 million of those people. Or no, some people think that's 49% of the U.S.
Well, okay.
People. So
clearly that's not true.
Yeah.
So we can, if we're going to talk about the facts, talk about the people who were actually there, which you can correct me if I'm wrong, like a few hundred or something. And they, one of them drove a truck into people who were counter protesting or whatever, and killed a woman, and it fits. 19, it fits the definition of domestic terrorism.
100% agree with that.
So I think I
like that a lot, actually. To think
there's a definition that
very small group of super radicals.
Well, yeah. Right? So that's interesting. Well, yeah. That group of people clearly is.
Half of the country is that way. I'm not sure.
No, it's clearly something in between. So, for instance, it's naive to think. I think it's naive to say that Trump equivocating on this. And when I say Trump equivocating, what I mean is he said there is violence on many sides. Okay, so that's a pretty good definition of the word equivocating.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Yes.
So for Trump to equivocate, I think it's naive to say that does not send a message to people who are already in their own minds sympathetic to the white nationalist agenda. Now, they may not wear a swastika. They might not think that like blacks should be sent to Africa or whatever. They might just be a person who goes, you know what? I'm sick of not understanding languages when I'm at the grocery store. Right. And I don't think that it should be that way.
Right.
Well, okay. So there's like a legitimate...
Those kids are going to our schools that need to learn to speak English. That isn't the same as somebody marching with a swastika.
No.
Or it is.
And actually, there's also a difference between kids in school need to learn English, and I don't want adults who are in their own groups in a non-work setting, say shopping for groceries, to speak another language. Those are actually different claims. Yep. You could argue it is very important that any immigrant or refugee, especially under the age of 18, learn English immediately. I would hold that view for their sake, for everyone's sake, like a robust assimilation of refugees.
Because you like white American Western
No,
culture.
because you can't get anything done if you don't speak the same language.
I agree, yeah.
Like if you want to succeed in America, and if we want if I want immigrants and refugees to have a really good shot at having a good life here, and if they never learn English,
Sure.
those chances go way down.
Sure.
Okay, so
there's
there's
the
that.
spectrum from you to the white nationalists, and that's some of the stuff that you and they might agree on.
Oh my gosh! Insofar, I think 90% of Americans would agree that
Okay.
immigrant children should learn English. I think there's very few people who would say it
However,
doesn't
most
matter.
of the people that stand up to say that make a red flag to people to say, I wonder if that guy might be a racist then. Like, you know
Well,
what I'm saying?
I don't know.
What are you going to do? Go out and, anyway.
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
The association problem is, all my point is I am absolutely stunned by the weekend's events. Like, I was like, wait a second. We have this? Like, I thought, like, I'm genuinely taken aback.
That it happened, or you're taken aback by
That
people's
happened.
response?
Well, both.
to
I
it.
mean, well, first of all, what in the world? I'm still stuck on what in the world. Okay, here's what it is. Here's where I'm at. I'm fine with calling white nationalists, white supremacists, Nazis, people that are those things, especially self-identified ones.
Yeah.
I would fine with calling them my enemy. Okay, like
They are, yeah, they're
Now,
your enemy.
I would like to know who my enemy is. I would like to know who isn't them. And now, once we get there, which I'm not there yet, because I don't know who's what or what the people with the torches thought. Are they all? I'm still behind on that. I know it's easier
Okay.
to label every white person in the state of Virginia that, but it's not exactly that.
Of course, that's not true. Yeah.
But I've got more work to do to try to draw the lines and name
Sure.
the groups and see who self-identifies and who covertly identifies.
Right.
There's work to do there for me. And then secondly, once I do have them, I've got to categorize them and strategize what would be effective. First of all, I got to name my goals. Do I want them to not be able to demonstrate? Do I want them to not be able to have websites? Would I like racism,
Yeah.
racist thoughts to become illegal? Good question. I mean,
There is
certainly I
a
don't, but-
like for instance in Germany, it is
what do we wanna do?
illegal. It's illegal to instantiate Nazi actions in public in Germany. It's not illegal in America. There's a legitimate question: do we want it to be more like Germany, or do we want to keep our more robust
question.
free speech? Let's bracket that question because
Here's
I don't think we're
another
going to answer it
question.
right now.
Here's another just general question. What do you want to happen to a person who has those views, who marched with a tiki torch and didn't beat anybody up or commit any crimes? What do you want to happen to that guy? I don't know the answer to that either.
Well, what I want
But
to happen
what
to
do
that.
we want to happen to those people? Would we like them killed? Would we like them shipped off? Would we like them to lose their jobs? Would we just like them to be publicly shamed? What do we want to happen to those people? And
Yeah.
and what we want, will that further our goals? Like, for instance, the next thing I want to do, I mean, and this is one whole question I want to hear your answer. I'm not just trying to talk a bunch.
Well, you're doing a good
I
job
know,
so far.
but also if you tie that to the same with ISIS, I don't know how to think of it in a different way. Like,
Yeah.
what I want to happen to ISIS may not be the best thing to stop them, such as bomb all them or go get them. Well, maybe that radicalizes more. I don't know.
Right. You bring up a good point that how do you deal with hate groups in a way that reduces both the recruitability of hate groups and the real world effects of the violent actions of hate groups?
Yeah, and what you like, the vindictive justice that you seek, like, right? That part of it is,
Yeah.
I would love it if they got stung by a bee or got a bunch of paper cuts or
Yeah.
they
It would
got
be
yelled at the
really
mall 'cause-
emotionally appealing to you for that to happen.
But,
yeah.
I
Satisfying.
have a feeling that a lot of what are those things play into the hands of ISIS and white supremacist group and grow their platform. And I have a feeling that they're a little bit, maybe oddly, because I find them dumb, but they oddly might be a step ahead of some other people and calculate and know, at least their leaders know how to grow their movement based on our outrage.
Well,
That's what
and
I'm afraid of.
and that wouldn't be an insane proposition because groups with very few other types of resources will tend to think about how they can use whatever resources they do have to yield the biggest possible product. I think this is the basic understanding of why terrorism sort of exists. It's like
Because it works.
you can't win a war. Like Bin Laden can't beat America militarily. That's completely out of the question. So, well, what can he do? Well, he can plan these very public actions that have insane visibility, right? That goes so far beyond like what he and his band of disciples could accomplish in like a straight up confrontation. You know what I mean? And so it's worth asking those questions. I think those questions are above my pay grade. Probably. I don't know the answer.
Most people, I'm just kind of like lost on how many people seem to know the answer or criticize other answers, and I
don't know, but I'm not sure that that's what people are really angry about. Like, for instance, there was a lot of backlash on Trump equivocating, and this is basically the first time a president, or maybe even almost any governor or senator in the last 50, 70 years, whatever, has done this, has not called out like obvious name brand white supremacy. I mean, in a while.
To say the thing that conservatives would be saying right now, which is, yeah, and Obama won't name extreme Islam or whatever.
Well, there's a difference, because the difference being that
radical Islam.
Yeah, radical Islamic terrorism.
Wasn't there a thing about not naming that? And
yeah, and I don't know. Well, okay, but first of all, what Obama's doing is not using a particular term, but Obama is always condemning the actions unequivocally. He's just saying this term does more damage than good globally. That's his view. Okay? Now, you could disagree with that view. You could say whatever fancy things you want to do, Obama, like, you got to call things what they are. That's fine. But Obama never said, well, you know, the radical, like, the Al-Qaeda has some problems, but, you know, so does the government of Belgium, and it's kind of just a big
there's
soup.
A pretty good amount of that on the list. I mean, I'm not trying to be anti. I don't know. I'm just saying there's a pretty good amount of people on the left that go, yeah, and it was our fault that we have ISIS. That's kind of the same mentality. Like, yeah, all sides are bad. America's bad because of what we do for oil in the Middle East, and ISIS is bad.
Right?
Isn't that equivocating by the left? I'm not accusing.
I see what you're saying. No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be doing all this bad stuff if it wasn't for what we did.
But that's an argument about
ISIS isn't equal to us.
Sure, but that is an argument about cause and effect, not an argument about sort of ideological equal ground. So, and it's not necessarily clear that Trump meant sort of ideological equal ground, but he did equivocate. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you say, where did ISIS come from? I mean, there's no way to answer that question without going into, like, previous wars where various Western powers, including the United States, have propped up certain leaders for their own benefit. You can't talk about ISIS without talking about Saudi Arabia, who's been an American ally for decades and decades.
Are extremely complicated. There's a lot of unintended
however,
consequences. You don't got a grip on it, and neither do I.
However, it is certainly not true that because black people got civil rights, that's like where white supremacy came from. True. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, white supremacy started slavery. So you can't make an analogous argument there.
Yes,
white supremacy is just sort of universally to be rejected by any thinking person.
Yes.
Or moral person. And so if Trump equivocates, I think this is what people are angry about. It's like, we know, it's just sort of like the facts, that the publications most in support of Trump are sort of this alt-right, loosely considered, Breitbart, InfoWars, etc. And we know that those are the places you are most likely to find avowed white nationalists like Richard Spencer, for instance, who gets to write this giant piece that they've prominently feature on Breitbart that gets shared a million times or whatever. So we know that Trump knows those people supported him, and so it's naive to say there's nothing there in him not condemning it, right?
Yeah, and I said this yesterday. Like, there's nothing. I mean, I think it's debatable which is worse: being a racist or not even being a racist and being willing to personally gain from it. That's a creepier thing in a way to me. Like, it's like being racist is like real bad, but it's almost understandable because it's like a product of what you think or experience or grew up and what bad stuff, your intellect, all this stuff. No,
it's if you know racism is wrong.
Off of it,
that's way worse.
It's a lot
that's
worse.
Surely worse.
So I would argue Trump intentionally not naming it or calling out is extremely despicable.
To use like a church
not do.
Right. To use a church analogy, okay, let's say you have like a tent preacher in 1965 who knows that biracial marriage is fine because he follows Jesus or knows what Jesus said, but whips them people
all up
and
at
goes,
revival.
blacks are
Right.
marrying whites, and they
right.
go, yeah,
That
and
got
they pass
worse.
the hat.
Yeah.
That's so much worse
Yeah.
than the 75-year-old
That's right.
woman
Who
in the
just thinks
tent
that.
who's just always
Right.
thought that.
I completely
You know what I
agree.
mean?
I think it's an important distinction. For one, the fact that we put racist as actually the worst thing a person can be, that's weird because it creates this other thing to me, which is, wait a second, who is worse?
Right.
Like, hang on a second. Who is worse? A hate-filled person, somebody who is hate-filled, or somebody who is committed a violent crime?
Yeah.
So to get uncomfortable with it would be a peaceful, hate-filled, alt-right white supremacist marching with his point of view,
Yeah.
or a super leftist who comes and incites and creates violence. To me,
Yeah, it's hard.
Clearly, violence is worse than a bad idea. It just is. I don't know another way to put it. First of all, it's a crime. So crimes are worse than not crimes. And bad ideas are bad, but there's something there. Like, which is worse? Like,
I think it
don't
depends
know
on
about
how robust your commitment to nonviolence is. So
I mean, isn't that what we're scared of?
Right.
Isn't that what we don't like about white supremacists? They might do violence or harm or abuse to minorities. But isn't that what we're trying to prevent, is them causing harm to other people? So the people that already are causing harm have already gone into the category of people that I want thrown in jail.
Yeah, I think
I
that
want a riot, a violent counter-protester in jail. I don't want somebody who is racist to go to jail for that, right?
Right. Well,
Which one is, I don't know.
Except that there are larger scale concerns than just individual acts of violence. So, for
Yes, that's
instance,
true.
you've heard of the school to prison pipeline, which is sort of a simple phrase that denotes the whole process of the broken education system and how black youths are so much more likely to be sent to prison, even for the same sort of classroom disruption as white kids or whatever. And this just feeds into a whole system-wide injustice. And in that sense, the quiet racist is still a potential danger through his or her votes and whatever.
Maybe a bigger danger, but not individually.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean that person needs a baseball bat. The person,
well, right.
The school teacher who doesn't get the systematic thing good enough yet.
Yeah, I mean,
those, again, two different things, but we don't, the violent part is the bad part. I mean, you can't take the group thing, the systematic thing, and then take your anger out on that on one guy with a tiki torch. That doesn't help anything.
Yeah, I think that
And
probably most
crime.
people would agree with you. It's just that it's so brazen, it's so obviously wrong to just have a white nationalist group run into protesters, and then to have the president sort of waffle on it. That's the thing.
It's scary.
I think that's
agree with
it. I don't think that. My impression is not that people are, and then it's so bad that I saw people. This is anecdotal, but a lot of my Facebook feed, which I checked against the rules, against my own rules, was people saying, "Hey, share what your pastor said this Sunday about, the events," and people from all different denominations, pastors from all different denominations, are sort of like, "This is something we can all agree on," and then of course the next day Trump released his second statement to sort of quell this backlash, because one might say finally even Christians are sort of even evangelicals or whatever are criticizing him for this. I just think it's the starkness of his response with the the vagueness of his response and the starkness of the action, and sort of they literally have Nazi flags.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not connecting dots here.
Maybe I'm the one that may be accused of being a wait and see guy or whatever.
Sure.
But I am for sure that way with hopefully everything. I mean, I like that way. So, but this is the kind of thing where I woke up this weekend and was like, wait a second, is this, it makes me question my wait and see. I'm not using that. I'm not a Trump supporter in any way. I discredit most everything he does, but I can't help but feel that a lot of the stuff is overblown, or like I said, the Boy Scout. I mean, it's just like there's all this frenzy going that's feeding it that's overblown. That's still true. That's still true to me.
Sure.
And
yeah,
so,
of course.
but
the outrage machine doesn't take a day off.
Yeah,
No.
that's still killing me. But when I woke up with this, I was like, holy shit, this is real. This is the tone. This is the frenzy. This is on the ground. This isn't in the media.
Right.
This isn't in social media. This is happening. And I mean, I woke up as soon as I saw those people going on whatever night it was, Friday night, with those torches. I'm like, holy shit, like torch, like, it's visceral. It's like scary. And my first thought is, y'all people, don't show it. Just don't everybody go down there and counter protest. We know what will happen. There will be violence. There will be.
Yeah, but a lot of people are
more of it, and everybody's empowered. Like, next time those fuckers show up, we're gonna go get them. And now there's more and more people that are on that side this week than last week, right?
Well, are there
more people more prone to more violence this week than last week?
I don't know. I mean, I'm thoroughly committed to nonviolence, so any act of violence, I would always condemn it, no matter what.
You can't get. I don't know. I mean, I get. That's what I'm saying. I get pretty confused when I think about, like, well, don't go to the protest and you can't be a victim. Just don't go down there.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming anybody. I think counter protest is a valid thing.
Yeah.
But it's going to bring an element of. I mean, there's going to be the violent people that are going to sneak in on the counter protest.
But there's it's
going
go down and keep the counter protest peaceful. Number one, go as a peacemaker.
Ever happen, though.
No, that happens all the time.
Well, but when it's escalated like this,
when I was at the
bad element will show up and push things over the line.
They will try. But I was at the Tax Day March, and a group of people in black with bandanas were doing a drum circle around, and they ended up not being violent, but everybody was watching them, and if they had started, we would have stopped them. Like, I could tell they would have been stopped.
That's a good question. I haven't been to a protest. Don't intend to go to one. But what would you do if the people on your side, 3 shoulders down from you?
I would have grabbed the 3 biggest guys around me and held the back, called to the cops. No, I would have used restraining. I would have restrained them with as many big guys.
They would have perceived that as violence, and
I would have asked the police to come and arrest them. Yeah, just to keep it as peaceful as possible.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't use force. Force and violence are not the same things.
True.
Right?
Right.
A 12-year-old boy has a knife and is running at another 12-year-old boy, and a 30-year-old man picks him up and grabs the knife. That's force, but it's not violence.
If there's a double-sized rally next weekend in Blacksburg, you think people like you will be able to stop it from becoming violent? Or do you predict more violence?
I'm not going to make a prediction.
Which of those is more likely?
I have no idea. I don't know. But there are two things that a person at a counter protest could do that I would find incredibly admirable. Number one is to maintain the peace within the counter protest, and number 2 is to be willing to have violence done against you in the name of justice and love. And that's basically what people did at the lunch sit-ins in the civil rights movement. The poor woman who was killed, part of her probably knew that was possible, and her death may do incredible good.
Right.
And that's sort of the risk you take when you decide to be nonviolent and go into a potentially violent situation. I kind of think that's one of the most powerful things anybody could do.
Do you have an answer to what you would like to see happen to white supremacists? What is your hope for them, whether punitive or
I would,
or whatever?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I don't have a really strong view on this, so I'm kind of shooting from the hip.
You don't have a strong view on white supremacy.
No. Of course I have a strong view on white supremacy. I don't have a strong view on what should happen practically in society to reduce harm. My kind of guess is that, from what I understand about human and group psychology, the best thing for America would probably be something like this. White supremacy is shown to be impotent and whiny on a grand scale. And so people are not drawn to it. And then simultaneously, if somehow really brilliant public speakers and leaders in America could tie white supremacy, like explicit white supremacy, to some of the more insidious and less obvious social injustices that we have. Like, for instance, I don't believe in equality as a virtue. It doesn't matter that everyone has exactly the same thing, but equality of opportunity is important.
Right.
And there's a lot that can be done to make opportunities for people of color better. Just if you think, the only thing you have to agree is that all men have equal value, all humans have equal value.
Yeah.
But they've
That should be
shown,
enough to disavow the
like they've shown in studies, you know, judges and like these are lawyers of 30, 40 years. They do these studies where they send a judge identical or they send a bunch of judges identical papers from like up and coming law students, and they're told to check their work. And in one of them they say the young lawyer is African American.
Oh, no, you know what they
in
do?
other ones
Probably
they say
is
it's
they just have-
Caucasian.
His name is like Jamirius.
Well, in
or
this one
something.
they do that, but in this one they same name,
Yeah.
John Clark,
And they're told.
and they're told his race or they're told he's white, and they have shown a difference in how
Oh,
these
100%.
judges will
That's right.
respond to the paper.
Not a
They get
surprise.
more condescending with the black
That's right.
students, and they're fake students. It's the exact same paper.
Yes, right. And
So-
that's not a surprise.
Well,
I
I'm
don't find it a
not
surprise.
surprised by it, but that's insidious. So if somehow we could use the sort of like insane theatricality of a situation like this to point to the more persistent, subtle, and less obvious ways that human beings are biased, that's the best scenario. And that might be a tall order.
It's almost all negative to me. Almost everything I'm seeing is bad signs on every side, and on all sides.
Okay.
All sides. I think that was a very funny phrase. Like there's like 34 sides, and they're all bad. What Trump
Right.
said. But, it's all troubling to me because I thought we had moved this thing on to where we were saying overt supremacy stuff's not a problem. It's blah, blah, blah. Now we're focused on systematic. But now it's like, wait a minute, back to overt. And now not systematic, or is it the same? Or, I mean, like now it's just, and now we're conflating the two back and forth again.
They're-
and
no,
it's
they've
making
always-
the systematic stuff look like it's under the thumb of this other group. Like it's not. I mean, their platform is probably it was a really good weekend for white supremacists. That's what I'm saying. Really good weekend.
You think that that the events will do that movement good?
They had a great weekend.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think that.
Thanks in part
They-
to some of us.
Well, yeah. So
That's what I think. That's what I'm afraid of. That's
Sure.
what I'm scared. If everybody else is speaking from their fears, those are mine. So maybe that's my
Right.
visceral, intuitional fear. But that's a little. I feel like the white supremacists won the day.
maybe. I mean, I guess it's hard to
They're
say.
not about to. What are they going to do? Like, what are they? I mean, if we react to them and all make stands, what are they going to go? Oh, they don't like us. We better knock it off. I mean, I just don't even know what the standing. I was asking somebody what. It's our responsibility to hold them accountable. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? What are you going to do to them? What are you going to do to them that's going to help your cause?
Right, but that's why I'm
And I
saying
can't even think of anything.
it
So
may
I don't
not
know what
have
we're doing.
anything to do with those 300 individuals at the rally. It might simply be that the viscerality, the visceralness of that interaction will be enough to show many moderates, specifically moderate conservatives, that like, oh, there is something really dark under the surface here.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that stuff my niece has been telling me about the school to prison pipeline is not so crazy after all. I mean,
Yes,
it could
maybe
just be
so.
that.
Yes.
So
Well,
I don't
that's
know.
The bigger scale, longer term,
Yeah.
unintended consequence. But you're not in control of that. We're just
Well,
taking the
no.
ride on what happens there. Like,
Yep.
and who's in control here? Well, my sense is the white supremacists hold the.
I don't know.
You know that they have the power to both make noise, get coverage, and incite poor behavior on other side. That they have all those. If they were smart, they know that they have those things at their disposal.
Well, let's just
So
say
how
this.
will they use those tools that we have given them?
Let me just throw out a quick rebuttal, which is that the case of the situation, public opinion about Muslims in general goes down whenever one or a few radical Muslims take violent action in America. So it could simply be the case that any cause of sort of like white pride, European cultural pride, and pride of place will take a hit when a handful of white supremacists get violent. So it could just be the opposite of what you're saying. I don't know.
And well, it's not one or the other is the problem. So there are, phenomenon you explained, great. I love it. I'd like to see more of that. I have a family member who was a Trump supporter and then was like, saw some of the shit going on early in the presidency and now is like, this guy's crazy. And he's trying to, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like I saw somebody change their mind.
Well, it's just good to see someone change their mind in general.
Like, well, right on. Right. So that's good, and we would like to see more of that, and maybe this will cause that. On the other hand, there are, I would say, it's harder for other people to understand this, but there are many people in the South and in Virginia, in South Carolina, that absolutely would denounce the KKK and Nazis and white supremacists who also really don't think you should take down the statues. And so those people will casually maybe go a different way, like, or it's going to seem like they do. And that's complicated.
I guess I have a little bit of faith.
I don't agree with them, but
I guess I have a little faith in someone who would say that they have other reasons for wanting to keep the statues, that like still what these guys did is abhorrent.
Right.
Maybe
what I'm saying is those people are now going to be really lumped into that category by the people over here in Seattle, at least. Right?
I guess, that's a worry.
I was reading a Facebook post of somebody from my high school that's smart, intelligent guy like, and it's not hateful. The guy's not hateful, but it's like, whoa. And like they're discussing in their Facebook threads how this is so sad what's happening to them, to us, and our history and our heritage. And they're not hate-filled people. I know nobody will believe that, or they have some really bad ideas crossed up in there, in my view.
Sure.
But they would certainly people that would disavow instantly those people, but agree with those people about the statues. That's complicated.
But I guess that. I guess
or
if anything,
you want to lump them all in that category. I don't know.
Just like the sit-ins,
it's kind of sad.
Just like the sit-ins gave sort of a stark point to segregation and Jim Crow in the South. I don't think it's unlikely that events like this will give a kind of a stark point to the conversation around Confederacy monuments and sort of war of northern aggression kind of language down in the South.
Well, there'll be people like me who at one point would have said, no, don't change the name of the road. I mean, it's the name of the road. Don't change. And I still kind of practically don't really want all the names of all the roads forever to change. I mean, that's a little bit annoying from just a traveler point of view. But I could have even said, well, look, don't mess with it. It's not hurt. This is just the way it is. I mean, if you try to scrub all the way back, we have to. I mean, who knows where that's. There's a logic to that. Now, at this point, I understand that the ship has sailed to some degree, so I will not resist. If you want whatever statues you want to take down, any roads you want to change the name of, if that'll help. I won't stand
we
in the
do
way of
scrub.
that.
I mean,
feel free.
They're on the National Mall in D.C. There's now a Black History Museum and a Native American museum. I mean, it's not like it isn't true that. Well, why do we only want to do this with the South? It's not true. We go back and we sort of make these half-assed atonement gestures for
right.
but for all of it.
Yeah, and you could make more, and you could go farther, and you could, who knows?
But it's not true. It's not true that it's selective.
You wouldn't go so far. You wouldn't go so far progressive that everybody in Greenwood would voluntarily swap housing with everybody in South Seattle. We won't go that far to equalize.
Right.
The
Sure.
thing. So
yeah.
I mean, there's some amount that will,
of course,
change things. Some amount we won't.
Well, there's a real difference between how much is any one person willing to suffer for the sake of good in their own life, and there's another question, which is what ought our children to learn as they grow up. Those are different. Now, of course, there's a huge lack of people willing to do the first thing, and most people are very unwilling to suffer. But that doesn't mean we can't come to pretty good agreement about what our children should learn. And so children growing up in a community in the South that really sort of lionizes and heroicizes, the aims of that war, and if they don't,
it's hard for me to have a bad thought about Robert E. Lee, if I'm honest. Like, my thoughts of him were all positive, basically, growing up.
Well,
I still don't think of him as a bad guy, but I totally think we don't need statues of a failed war, all that, like,
or a Confederate flag
but I'd
hanging
have to say
at a state capitol.
Yeah, of course. But I'm saying even now, and what speaking to kids growing up, and when I go back and look at the people from my from my high school on Facebook, I'm like, oh yeah, this is just what you grew up in, so this is what you know. And it's not really, it's nothing. It's not even that crazy. Like for me, when somebody says Robert E. Lee, I don't cringe. I just don't. I don't have that thought. And I understand somebody in Seattle when you say Robert E. Lee, they go ooh, and that's just I can't change that.
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of weird, is all.
Are we taking any listener questions? Or?
Well, they're just a bunch of. We only have white nationalist listeners, so all their.
The middle.
Yeah. Yes, which is what we're speaking to and about. So why is there? I mean, let's move off this topic too. But from doing Depolarized, from embarking on the journey that you're doing. Another wrinkle in it, and I know you're supposed to stay off social media, but you did post. What does love your enemies mean? And I don't know how you phrase that, but okay, obviously that's one.
Yeah.
Like if we can clearly identify white supremacy as our enemy, okay, now we're supposed to love them.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So,
well, to answer the question of where has the middle gone, I'll refer you to the 41 episodes of the Depolarized podcast, where we basically.
Was it getting worse? Is this making it worse?
I don't know. My kind of gut. And I'm not a political scientist, but my gut is that we are in a very long period that is currently intensifying of most thinkers, politicians, leaders, movements that get and gain traction are doing so through ideological purity as opposed to moderation. For instance, you might have, I'll give you two examples. You might have a John Kasich kind of a guy who says, look, things are complicated. We need a steady hand and we need experience or whatever. Well, he didn't do that well, right? Even not just Trump,
right? That's all.
Not just Trump, Jeb Bush, right? Whatever. But Cruz, Cruz uses pretty inflammatory language. Trump used very inflammatory language, and you even see it on the left, right? I mean, like Bernie uses pretty, not inflammatory, like violent language, but he uses very extreme language, very black and white language.
Right. I mean, his moderate views are not the ones that make him Bernie that we love. Right?
Yeah, right.
It's his extreme views that function.
Right. I mean,
as a vehicle for.
And I'm not criticizing any particular politician by saying that. I'm just saying that currently, the louder you are and the more brash your movements tend to be growing.
Bernie's such a good example of that. So obviously Trump's some example of being extreme and it works, whatever. So we know that. But Bernie's a really good example now that you bring that up. If he were simply economically moderate but had all the character and personality and all that stuff, he'd be nothing. He'd be useless. He'd be just some old whatever. It'd be nothing.
The appeal.
The only appeal is he's so extreme and he happens to be likable or tell the truth or whatever people like to say about it. But.
Now I privately wonder if there's an opening for a politician who baldly speaks the truth about moderation and about extremism. And I don't know. And I sort of hope there is. Like for someone to just come out and say, aren't you guys all sick of this? Let me explain it to you.
How could you rally that so hard?
I don't know.
Gain
that
platform and notoriety. And
that's the hard one.
As doing that, though.
I know that's the hard one, but it's not inconceivable to me that we get to a point.
A good hero.
It might take 10 more years or whatever, but people might get so disgusted that they go, "Oh my gosh, that's like water to a thirsty person or a
possibly."
It could get there.
So we may have to get more cartoonish first.
I think probably true. It's we know a lot about human psychology for those who are willing to look and read. There's a lot of really good, robust explanations for why people are tribal and for why activist voices tend to move parties. The fact of the matter is most people are not that interested in learning about that, unfortunately. And also, politics is not a thing that most people spend a lot of time on. And so until there is a national crisis of some sort, people tend to not focus on politics.
We may be headed toward crisis, though.
And we may be,
of. That's just what my sense. I don't have any predictions, and I'm basically a human optimist in the long term. I'm skeptical in everything on its here and now on the ground, but long term, it seems like society works shit out overall. But currently, I go, whoa, this feels a scary way to me, and now it's scarier this week than last week. It's more volatile than last week, and I don't think we've improved anything yet.
Yeah,
I don't even know if we've discovered anything yet. In fact, the left and the right problems that we have, they may be, this may be the beginning of them, maybe.
Yeah, I mean it's quite possibly true.
I'm first bad rally where things got weird. That might be what that is. I don't know. If I was the alt-right and the white nationalist, I would say more of this is what I would be saying. If I was their sharp leader, that's what I'd be thinking.
Maybe.
It's a little bit scary there, but
yeah. You want to talk about something
let's
else?
Move on. What's the other thing you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of time here. Maybe we can just we can pique some interest and we can follow it up later.
Yeah. I'm not in a hurry for whatever you got to do. We got to eat lunch in a little bit,
But I texted you last night and I said, hey, I have a book title, which of course I haven't written anything about, but it's just an idea. And so the title of the book would be The Way is Narrow, Why So Many Christians Are So Awful, parentheses, and also non-Christians, and also me, and probably you.
Long book title.
Long book title. But the idea being like, why? Like, we know so many Christians are awful. We know so many Christians act contrary to the person that they claim to follow. Why? Like, why? And not just saying sin, because I think sin is like a good answer in a certain sense, but like, could we get a little more specific than that? And the reason that I was asking that question is because I've been doing a little bit of research, and some of it's been on the Bad Christian Facebook page, on my own, and on a number of friends who posted it, trying to get people to think about various roadblocks to faith. And so I asked these series of questions like, if you no longer are religious, why? If you are religious but you're experiencing problems or doubts or whatever, what are they? You know, what has turned you off in the past or whatever. Sort of different ways of saying the same thing. And I got 126 answers to this question. And 35% of them, by far the largest percentage of anything, were directly related to the church itself or Christians as a whole. You know, that was just like the most recognizable kind of an answer. And so that got me kind of thinking like, well, why? So that's a really good question. You know, like 4 times as many people said that as like homosexuality, for instance. 4 times as many people said that as the problem of evil or suffering. There are other answers sort of like that, but other Christians or the church, sort of the big one. And basically, I was reading through those this morning, and there's sort of 4 categories of this answer. And so I'll just say them, and then any thoughts we talk about them. First one is that Christians use a lot of spiritual language, and they have all the right like spiritual trappings in their culture or in their life, and that this, to many people, seems inversely related to be Christ-like. So they're very willing to say they'll pray for you, but very unwilling to actually do anything to help you or spend any time. And this is not, of course, everybody, but like some people saw so much of this that they felt, oh, well then, so being a Christian doesn't make you any better. So I can discard this. The second category is really more just like a general question, and this is maybe the one I'm most interested in, which is, if you look at the whole of people who claim to be religious or claim to be Christians, wouldn't you expect to find like a difference between them and everybody else?
Yeah, and most studies seem to say that they're not. It just kind of works out the same with every moral measure for the most part.
Yeah, or I mean, you just take like
certain ones.
For instance, like an issue. So some people would say like, you know, they look like average Americans or whatever. And here's a study I recently read that I found alarming. In America today, or I guess it was in 2015, so recently, this research firm presented these people with all these questions about like what they would say to 2 possible military options in Iran. And the most astounding one is they gave two options: a tactical nuclear strike on another city, not the capital, that would kill 2 million Iranian civilians, or a conventional military attack that would kill up to 20,000 U.S. soldiers. So it's a 100-to-1 ratio. 47% prefer the nuclear strike. 53%
any American lives
to 20,000 things. So, but 60% would approve it, like would approve of it. So there's 13% who would prefer conventional military, but hey, if my leaders chose this, I would approve of it. Now, you got to think, in a nation that 60% or so of whom identify as Christian or whatever, to say that you would approve of a 100-to-1 ratio of dead women, children, and non-combatants to soldiers who literally sign up to maybe die. That's the whole point. That you have a problem.
Well, I mean, I will give you what I believe to be the explanation.
Okay, let's work on this one.
It's a human bug.
Okay.
Or feature, or whatever way you want to look at it. But it's only based in, I mean, everything goes out the window. It's just, I would almost describe it as a political problem. If 100 people broke into my house, I would kill every one of them in a second and not think twice about it, and it wouldn't have anything to do with the lens of my spirituality or Christian. I'm not saying literally, but
if they broke into your house because they're criminals.
Whatever, right, whatever. I'm just saying I would trade 100-to-1 in self-defense if I felt imminent threat or whatever. And that's the way people, the only thing I can describe to you is, as a society, we've got everybody whipped up, everybody's terrified, and they're acting that way because everybody's incredibly selfish. They're not even thinking logically on the great scale. They are fired up and scared of Iran, and they're making decisions that wouldn't even pass their own scrutiny test if they could think about it logically. They are simply not even operating out of what they believe.
Interesting.
They
right.
do believe, you're right, it doesn't matter, I'm scared of Iran.
Well, okay, that's interesting, but
they're just
then
derailed.
Their fear, so then you could ask a question of, then maybe there's a question of, why isn't Christianity enough to fight against that fear in such a starkly obvious scenario, such as 100 times as many non-combatants?
I'm shocked
people
at
who
their
are not
lack
soldiers.
of ability to separate and perform logic. But I could preach a sermon on turn the other cheek, walk out in the parking lot, and have somebody punch my wife, and I wouldn't turn, or punch me in one cheek. I'm not really going to turn the other cheek on the way to the car after I preach that sermon. I just am not going to. Now, if I could sign up ahead of time before I walk to the parking lot, hit a switch that says, will I turn the other cheek? Yes, commit me to that decision. I would say that in good faith. I'd even pull the switch. But
well,
then when
okay.
it happened, if I have any agency, I'm not going to do it.
Right, but here's the problem.
That's the big version of that.
With your answer, this is a survey conducted in the safety of someone's home. This is being asked to pull the switch, not actually being punched.
I know, but that speaks to the level of fear-mongering, and baseline fear in the society as a whole.
I don't know what the
individual, I think you can get them to make the right decision, but that's just endemic of what it's the temperature is what
I mean, I think that's a really, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's fascinating. It's appalling to me.
There's certain things that break down. I mean, there's a certain amount of, you like to, your moral claims are not going to be your action regardless of whether it's Christian or not.
So the question, the real question might be,
never going to be as accurate. You're never as benevolent as you imagine you are.
Right.
You're
like
not.
why are people so different in fact than the principles they claim to live by? That's a fascinating question.
That's an evolutionary answer too. It's just it serves us well to be that way.
Sure. And so then but the thing is, there are people who have been totally changed by, for instance, following Jesus. And so it's not like this is true of everybody, that their views, that their commitments don't change them. That's why I want to call the book "The Road Is Narrow," because there are some people, and so how do we bridge the gap between being on the wide road and transferring over to the narrow road? To put it that way,
I'm one of the less offended people by hypocrisy, and when I say less, I maybe mean a little bit less. But hypocrisy is relatively natural. I just don't know anybody who's not hypocritical, Christian or not. And the disgust we have with hypocrisy is maybe a little overdone. Is what I like. I see people actually have a much lower view of humanity than most people,
Yeah.
which allows me to operate well because I ain't surprised by that kind of shit.
Well, yeah, and that's
just the way
maybe
I look
where
at
I'm
it.
going. I'm not sure.
My
Okay.
view of people is depravity and low and sin.
Yeah.
So much so that why am I listening to what they're saying? What they do is this is what we are. This is what we're like. It ain't good.
Yeah, but you could argue
I'm not
that.
that surprised by white supremacists or hypocritical people or politicians or Christians. I'm not that surprised. I
Sure.
just assume this is what they are and
Yeah.
what I am too,
Yeah. Well.
minus the supremacist part.
So there's two other of these kind of answers. The third one is there's something about churches and the church situation. You're going to say this is related, that actually seems to reward people who are not Christ-like. And and one example is pastors with narcissistic or other personality
Yes,
disorders.
Of course. Yeah.
And I have a little thing to talk about on this. I was just reading in this book the other day. In ancient Egypt, okay, there's like a long dynasty. I think for multiple dynasties for like maybe 500 to 1,000 years, central power in Cairo. Then that faded away. And as the central power in Egypt started to dissipate, local sort of chieftains sprang up and were kind of claimants to like a local authority. And what each of these guys would do at first is they would just sort of, by brute force, you had to be militarily strong enough to hold your area, your territory. But then that wasn't enough for people. That was not enough for people to respect you as the new ruler of them. What they would do is they would say, I have been appointed by this local god. So if maybe Ra, the sun god, was the one who had chosen the pharaoh, now they're saying, well, this local god has chosen me for our area. Mm-hmm. And then what they would do to prove that, the evidence they would marshal in support of their being chosen was their ability to maintain order in a world of chaos.
Do we call that manifest destiny?
Well, what I'm interested in is order and chaos. Mm-hmm. And I would say, a leader's right to rule is directly related to their ability to create and keep order in a world of chaos. I think that applies equally to Obama and Trump.
Well, yeah, and I mean every king in the Bible that God said.
But I'm saying how much have we
whatever.
changed?
And all the pastors the same way. The
Right.
Bible says you want a king, and God says you don't need one. You say, screw you, I need one.
I'm too afraid of chaos. I'm too afraid of chaos. So, but it might be worth contrasting Obama and Trump here. To a certain kind of person like myself, Obama says, Dan, the world is crazy. It's very chaotic. It takes incredible discipline, knowledge, diplomatic skills. It takes knowing the right language to use and working every angle to keep the world safe. And I go, thank you, Obama. Mm-hmm. Thanks for keeping us safe. Right. To someone who Trump speaks to, Trump says, look, guy, the world is crazy. You need a strong man who's brash and loud and not afraid to drop a bomb, and that's how you'll stay safe. And to some people, they go, oh, I feel safe. Yeah. But it's the same thing.
Right.
We just have a different view of what makes us feel strength. And so perhaps this explains narcissistic pastors of like, I'm here.
Sure.
You follow me. And people go, oh, there's order in my life. It's not chaotic.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously. I mean, individuals are just so weak. I mean, they just are. Like, we just attribute so much to people that just don't know. Like, it's that same feeling when you kind of grow up and you go, wait a minute, there are no adults. There is nobody in charge. There isn't anybody who knows anything or really has any. Honestly, very little people even have any real power or are aware of what it is that they have. I mean, they're relative to each other. There's a huge disparity, but it's not like there's anybody that can really control anything, including Trump or whatever. I mean, he wishes he could control more for sure, and Obama too. They're just the right puzzle pieces that fit at the right time and emerge. They're not masterminds. There are no masterminds, is what I'm saying. These things are just emergent things that speak to the populace at large. And here's what I feel. Here's what I'm going to say everybody's like. People are, especially this day and age, all I hear are extremely, extremely loud sheep. Everybody's sheep, but my gosh, are they loud and everybody's a sheep with a PA system. So
Okay.
they want a lot, but really they don't know. They're just reacting. They're following. They're wanting to be controlled. They're wanting to be herded, but they're screaming it is all. It's just the volume is just so high. That's the way I see it.
It's acceptable to be loud these days, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, if you're talking about the anti-racist people that are maybe virtue signaling. I'm not trying to say it's bad to stand up to racism on Facebook. Feel free.
Right.
Good. I should do it. Here it is. Here's mine. I hate white nationalism and white supremacy. It's bad. I disavow it 100%. Okay? So there's me saying that. But
Yeah.
I feel silly even doing that because, of course, I think that. Anyway, for whatever that's worth, that's worth. I'm not saying it's that bad. But what I'm saying is that still, to me, sounds like an extremely loud sheep that makes the really epic post on their Facebook about how that's it. They will stand with the blah blah. It's just that it kind of goes over my head or something.
Yeah, I think there's. I'm at least partly with you. I think that
you want to stand with a bunch of other people. We want to be heard in a certain. We want to identify.
Yes,
I mean, it's all that stuff.
I think Jesus speaks to this though and says, when you pray, go into your closet.
Right.
Do not do it on the street corner when you give. Given, the woman who gave her last half penny is better than the rich man who wrote a public check. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's something. I think where I might agree with you is that there are no masterminds at the macro level of the world and how it's going to go.
People are begging to be led. It's like Loki in the
Yeah.
Avengers.
But in
when
fact,
he says all that speech, I go, that sucks. He's right, but he is.
But there is some level of control at the personal level. And so I think that what is needed for maturity is to acknowledge a lack of control at the national or international level and to focus one's efforts on oneself and one's immediate community. And then from there, there might be a calling to something bigger that is more national. Perhaps you're supposed to be a radio host, for instance. But you got to start by just loving your neighbor. And I think we're more free to do that when we can sort of dethrone strong men or strong women, and I'm including
but you
Obama in that.
You don't dethrone them like you did Gaddafi. I mean, you dethrone them by
No,
not
in your
giving
own
them power in
mind.
the first
I mean,
place.
in your mind.
Not by stabbing them in the butt.
No. I'm talking about.
Whatever.
I'm saying on a personal level, you dethrone
right.
anyone who says, any person or any ideology that says, with me, you'll finally be okay.
Yeah, and then the other trap is the people that kind of wake up to that or realize that, like, wait a minute, I'm not going to be controlled by these people, so the nonconformists or the innovators and the people like that do that, then they just, once you get on the other side of that divide, you go, oh, then you just become one of the people that gets an audience and a platform, and you start, you know what I mean? So as soon as you break away and realize he doesn't know what he's talking about, they don't know what they're talking about, this guy that, then you go to the other side, and then the battle is to not try to
become a person who doesn't know what they're talking about but talks all the time.
Well, possibly that, but at least it can admit. I'm just saying it wouldn't be hard. For instance, a battle for me. It's not really a battle, but I could get a narrower set of ideas that speak to a base and then grow larger,
right,
at the expense of telling the truth and being me. But that's an allure. That's an easy thing to do, and it goes not just for podcasting, but for power, for business, for politics, for spiritual leadership. It becomes easy to characterize once you realize, oh, I'm not going to be a follower. Then it's hard not to become a narcissistic leader. Is another trap. So there's both types. So there's all the people competing that understand that there's a bunch of sheep out here.
Yeah.
Or you're a sheep. What's in between those two?
But what's in between is the people who just quietly do good work.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think that's more and more what I'm realizing.
Or maintain integrity and honesty, but still deal with ideas. I like that territory.
Yeah, I mean, your work might still work with ideas,
right?
But
they had to be honest and it had to be yours and not representative of what you perceive your base to be. That's That's
hard.
That's the battle to fight. And if you gave me more power, I have a little bit of influence or success or something now. Nothing I don't think of as a big deal. But if you gave me more, it'd be hard for me not to want more. I admit that.
Right.
If you put me in, if you tripled the size of what I do, it would be harder to maintain integrity, not easier.
Sure.
You would think it'd be the opposite.
Exactly.
But that's not true. So put me, if I had started preaching sermons and my church grew to 5,000. What
It'd
do you
be very
think? What, am I
easy
gonna
to
have more
think.
integrity at that point, please.
It'd be very
There's
easy
no
to
such
think,
thing.
oh, I'm on to something here.
Right.
I'm doing it right.
Right.
Well, and that's why
It's just
you're
built
just
in.
describing why it is so rare that people like Jesus and Gandhi and Socrates live. I mean, it's like,
Right. Yeah.
and when we
Sometimes
find someone
yeah.
like that, we
That's right.
we think this is the real thing.
That's why I'm a Jesus fan personally. I
Yeah.
mean, like I just
Or
I
modern
like it.
people who live like Jesus, right? I mean, Gandhi being one. You know, then you find these people and you go, "Oh my gosh, like this is possible because no one's like this," you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, Jesus didn't round off the corners to grow a base. I mean, you know what I mean?
I don't think so.
He's
No,
the one,
I don't think he did.
I think everybody, if you explore your ideas and hold your ideas and speak of them honestly, you should be free of being worried about being labeled. I mean, I've said a lot of things that sound like I'm against the resistance to the race. I think people have to take me for what I am because I think they'll hear me trying to explore honestly. I hope. But,
Yeah.
but Jesus was able to do that, and he knew he was right. I don't know if I'm right, so that's different. But he knew he was right, and he still wasn't concerned with really growing a thing or making sure to knock this out or do that. He had all the right answers and knew it and seemed content to be relatively quiet.
Yeah.
Which I like, or
Yeah.
not decisive or conclusive or any of those things, which I really like that. I think it's a really good model, even for a public person trying to push ideas. Maybe, I don't know, even push is like, I don't know. Maybe I try to push ideas I feel strong about, but maybe just explore. Like, that's why I like having you come in, because just think out loud a little bit. I don't know what
Well,
it is.
so speaking of ideas is a perfect transition to the fourth and final type of this answer I got, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is that a lot of people said that there appeared to be a clear overemphasis on belief in the church to the detriment of a focus on living a life of love. Why do you think that it's much easier for a religious setting
What was
to
the
focus
question
on belief?
that got those results?
Things that got in your way in one way or another, either knocked you out of the church or away from religious faith, or that have been impediments even if you are religious now.
Mm-hmm.
And so people felt like in Christian communities it was all about belief, like, do you believe the right things, you know, setting boundaries and walls and making sure everyone has the same beliefs, rather than Jesus, who appeared to sort of knock a lot of that down and knock down a lot of tribalism and whatever, and said, it matters what's in your heart, live a life of love. Why do you think that groups like this, why does it become such that belief gets vaulted up? And there, like, for instance, you don't have a test of virtue for someone who wants to teach Sunday school class or whatever. You know, why do so many churches allow divorced elders when it's clearly not there in the Bible? You know, but they have to have the right view about atonement.
Sure.
But you know what I mean? Like, what explains that, do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one, but there's something going on where judgment. Again, I think I have evolutionary answers to these things. Like,
Okay.
there's the short circuits where it just doesn't work out. What's in theory, I mean, it's a good example of that. We can do a lot of stuff in theory, cognitively, logically, belief-wise. Those things are not real. They're just notions and ideas that we can usually get reasoned or good answers to, or at least somewhat of sensible answers to. But it doesn't necessarily connect to our behavior. And one of those things that's really profound is judgment itself. So hypocrisy is, like, if you think of it in evolutionary terms, rotten meat is visceral. We don't like it. It doesn't matter what you believe
Disgusting,
about it.
yeah.
It is disgusting. People react to it. Violence is one. I mean, if somebody's violent, everything you thought you knew goes out the window, and you're in violence, fight or flight, whatever mode.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy is a stench to humans in the same way that shit is. And judgment is one that people go crazy about. So when you talk about slut shaming or fat shaming or gay people or divorced people, all of those things, if there's a perceived negative judgment, that makes everybody lose their mind. Like, if I even feel that you're judging the sentence I'm saying and thinking I'm an idiot, or that you think my muscles are small and you're judging me for it, my brain is short.
It just
I'm
turns
consumed
everything
with
off.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
But And so we like to say we don't want to judge because we don't like it. It feels real bad. But there's got to be some way where you can go, oh, no, I'm not like imposing anything, but I have to be free to have my thoughts about people. That's a weak person. She is dressed too skimpy. Everybody should be able to wear whatever they want to, of course. But I don't think she should have worn that here. Like that you can't ever stop that thought. You're going to have that thought.
Yeah.
If you're anti-slut shaming, sometimes you're still going to look at somebody and say, I don't think she should wear that.
There's
here.
a woman wearing a bikini and taking the Eucharist. Would be weird.
But that's personal judgments exist. So somebody's going to be disgusted by gay people.
Okay.
And you can't help it. And it's maybe not even wrong for them to have a personal vibe about it, and then what they do with that, and that stuff gets crossed up big time. So sometimes people are resisting being told that you can't judge something because they know, well, I can't help but have my thought. Are you telling me I can't have my own thoughts? I'm not even trying to harm a person, but so now it's like, well, you can't judge, and so now we start making it's kind of illogical. We start making these walls like, well, you can't judge divorced people, and these people are mad at those people because what if they are judging that people, and some people feel judged when they're not. So I think judgment is really operative in all of these things. It gets screwy real quick.
I sort of think of this problem of the overemphasis of belief and the underemphasis of living lives of love as more like candy for the brain versus solid food.
What is the candy?
The candy is the certainty of the beliefs. Yeah. I think that it's not so sexy to challenge people to love the unpopular kid.
But that goes into the judgment. That's what I'm saying. That's what I meant to if I'd misconnect that. As soon as you start talking about people's behavior like you are now, now it's judgment. Now you're saying, well, I should have given more to charity. Well, fuck you.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So when you try to evaluate, then maybe I didn't connect that well, but when you try to evaluate, is he living a life of love? You are master judgment asshole at that point. And we want to back off from being that because judging is bad or whatever. But so now it's just, how would you judge if somebody was...
So you're saying there's like a fundamental problem at the heart of any group that wants to follow Christ because the thing that Christ tells them to do will just turn people away at the door.
Maybe. I'm not sure exactly.
I'm kind of amenable to that view.
Doing the judgment of evaluating if you or your next door neighbor or somebody you love closely in your community group or somebody far away in your congregation or a Christian on the other side of the country, there's no way to even discuss it without judging their walk of love. And who the hell are you to do that? And how are we supposed to execute that process?
Let's not. Okay, but I don't think that what my impression from the respondents is not on a one-on-one level, there's this thing. It's more like from the pulpit or the clear message you get from the community is that what matters is that your beliefs are in line, not that you act like Jesus.
It doesn't enact to the judgment loop.
So
because
you think
if
it's a
somebody
way
judges
of...
my idea, that doesn't hurt me that bad. I don't like it, but it's not. That doesn't really...
Okay, so you think
you judge an action I did, I'm out of here, or I've got to fight you, or I've got to really prove it, or I got to ignore you. If you challenge my idea of the atonement, I don't feel judged in the same way.
Okay, well, let me give an example of a theoretical church community. You have a church community who gets together, and there are some there's a whole denomination called Evangelical Covenant Church, which holds this as a central tenet that we are not going to major on small doctrinal differences. If you can affirm the Apostles' Creed, you can come here, and we're going to focus on becoming like Jesus. Like, that does exist. Why does that sound like such a rare case? Why is that not the default? That's the question I'm interested in. Why do we want it to be a system of beliefs?
Because like you said, it's like the candy thing. If I go to that church, I'm like, Bridget, we're going to go to church. They're going to focus on our actions and what we do and we don't do. You want to go there?
Well, they're not necessarily going to criticize, pick it apart, but the preaching will not be about getting the ideas right. The preaching will be about turning yourself into someone who looks like Jesus. Like, if you went somewhere that did that every week.
How does that not turn into just like some moral behavioral coaching thing, though? Like, Now you have a pastor on a stage interpreting what it would be and telling you what to do. That's all I would hear. So I would say no, thank you. I would prefer
Rather do beliefs.
I'd rather do beliefs, because maybe if I get to believe in stuff and thinking critically, it will affect my behavior. But what do I want, a behavior coach?
Interesting.
I mean, if so, didn't the Bible? Can't I just look at the damn Bible and who's this intermediary asshole I need telling me what Jesus meant for me to do?
Well,
who's this guy?
yeah.
Is what if you start coming at me that way, I'm resistant to it personally. I can tell you that.
Interesting.
And maybe it's self-defense and maybe it's low moral, maybe it's low intellect, but I'm resistant to it. That's all I'm telling you.
And yet, obviously, a community of people committed to that would be so much more appealing to other folks.
Yeah, right. It would. I mean,
but it's kind of back to the road is narrow. Like, it's just when you meet a person, just a person in your regular life who has clearly, in fact, I just got home from a memorial service for someone in my wife's extended family, and she was just clearly a person who did not need her ego stroked.
Mm-hmm.
She did not need to be the center of attention, and she just did awesome work and like just loved everybody. When you meet somebody like that and you go, how you're so drawn to that person, but then there's this huge gap, because if you want to become like that person, it's a lot of work.
Right. Well, yeah.
And it's not just getting your beliefs right.
I like to think of everybody's problems as such. X person has X problem. Let's say Reva is super defensive in this certain situation.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Well, and it's been illuminated to her that that's not good.
Yeah.
And so now she doesn't have to be that way anymore. Good for her. Well, now, problem is she literally practiced that
her whole life.
28 years.
Yeah, right.
So if she practices the opposite of that for 28 years, we'll see.
Right.
So go ahead, now that you realize it, let's work on it for the equal amount of time that it got you to be this way, and then we'll see. First of all, obviously, even it wouldn't be as easy to do the opposite so it might take twice as long. So maybe if she works hard at it when she's 80-something, we'll check back in and see as the behavior change. But people's behavior don't change.
Well, yeah, they do, but just not very many people.
Not very many people, not very much.
The road is narrow.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to at least accept that fact on a sociological level.
Yes.
Now, anything happen with an individual, and almost all the problems that we have in our society is when we say a sociological level, a population level problem.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to fucking make it with this person, and that's never. They're two different.
And I sort of think
we're always conflating those two things back and forth.
Yeah, and I think I sort of think if I want to answer these questions, it would be to go sort of along that route, which is to say, look, individuals are rough.
Always will be. Don't try to even change. I mean,
most people don't try. I mean, or they do. I mean, that's the thing that I'm not so sure about. Like, I think God loves everybody. I think that a divine spark or something is in every person, but then it also does seem true that like most people don't really make an effort to sort of think hard or try hard at many things.
Yeah, well, they may not be capable of it though. Like, can't you just admit that?
Maybe.
Like, can they just not be capable of something they're not capable of? I mean, we see that with kids pretty easily. Like, behavior's wrong. I mean, poor thing. I mean, she's 4. What's she gonna do? Like, what are you expecting her to do, or how much? I mean, what? I mean, a 40-year-old has more ability than a 4-year-old in a way, and some of them don't actually. And also, so they should have a little bit more ability to be self-reflective and change their behavior. But on the other hand, they do have another 36 years of reinforcement to overcome too. So
yeah, I mean,
what are you trying to? I mean,
well, I don't think that Jesus would have taught anything if it was impossible to change. So,
well, again, individually, I would never say people don't change. I've changed. I've seen people change. I think a lot of but that's individually. So
thinking off just riffing, it might just be the case that like any group of people truly committed to like changing to be like Jesus will just necessarily be a small group.
Right.
They just would never get 10,000 members.
No, right.
Maybe that's just the truth. I don't know.
It is the margins. It is the fringes that are the actual where the stuff happens. It's not in the big fat part of the Venn diagram. That part's not going to move.
Yeah, I mean,
you can move the edges a little, and that's good. And it's worth doing, of course it is. But I mean, if you just take a white supremacist, for instance, let's just give him the knowledge that this one specific thing he's very wrong about, and let him fully digest that knowledge. Now, he still lives in a small town in rural Virginia, still has the same family, still has the same everything, all his policy beliefs, everything. You haven't changed his mind about any of those things. You've just changed his mind about the one thing. That'll still be a real hard fight for him to change. And even if he does change, think about how layered and embedded some of his economic views and political views and religious views are to the one thing that, oh, wait, black people are equal to me. Okay, sorry, I didn't have that right before.
Right,
now take that and what amount of work is that to infiltrate all the other things that layered into getting there in the first place? It's not just a wrong view he has that you want to correct.
And I also don't think that we should assume that the goal of any human life is to get all the right beliefs either. I mean, we wouldn't say we wouldn't say that, great people didn't, like, no one great lived before slavery was abolished. Of course. I mean,
of course.
They couldn't imagine slavery being, I mean, very, very few people. Right. But, like, I don't think St. Francis of Assisi wrote anything about slavery, for instance. We wouldn't say he's not great.
Right.
Because he didn't get the right view on slavery.
I mean,
it's like,
that's obvious to me. It isn't to everybody, but I think that should be obvious
hard.
To everybody. But, you're just not it just I mean, it's reasonable to have my view is just a very low view of people, and I like to think everybody's doing the best they can. Now, like, that's a benevolent way to look at it. I like to look at adults like children, and I think that's more or better. Like, I think people,
I don't like that.
I think that children get treated way too much like children. I think children need to be treated a little bit more like adults, and I think adults should be treated a lot more like children. That's the way I think.
I always talk to kids like adults and just make sarcastic jokes. And
no, I don't see why you wouldn't give them. You're depriving them of opportunity if you condescend to kids, and you're being silly if you treat adults like, well, once you have a good formed prefrontal cortex, you should get everything right. Is unbelievably naive. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with you, but I'll think about that some more. I think that was a good chat.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
If you guys want to hear more from me, you can listen to the last 41 episodes of Depolarize or Reconstruct, which just finished its first season. Season 2 coming probably late fall.
Anything else that happens, whatever, come in, drop by any Tuesday if you want to think out loud. I enjoy it.
Okay.